Well, good afternoon. I'll first update on the snow storm and the consequences of that and some of the work we're doing to clean up, and then move to talking about some of the reports, the very important reports on community safety that were released today as part of the agenda for the Executive Committee meeting next week. The cleanup work continues on the approximately 55 centimeters of snow that fell from Monday's major winter storm. The work has been ongoing 24 hours a day and will continue to be ongoing 24 hours a day until the job is done. 600 road plows, 200 salt trucks, and 360 sidewalk plows are out, and they're going nonstop, and they will continue to go nonstop. This was a big storm. It's right up there in the record books for Toronto, and it will take some time to clean it up, but the city is hard at it. Anyone who's been out shoveling some of the 55 centimeters of snow in their own yards or their own sidewalks know that this was not a typical Toronto snowstorm. That is why we moved quickly to declare a major snow condition, so that as we make good progress on plowing the snow, the separate task of actually removing the snow, something we rarely do in the city, could get underway. Snow plowing and clearing continue today, and some snow removal will also start today, likely on the Gardiner Expressway. And the removal operation itself, as distinct from plowing and clearing, will likely take several days, because one thing we know is that this snow isn't going anywhere given prevailing weather conditions until we move it. In my daily update with the city staff today on the subject of the cleanup of this snow, I heard that this will be a very large snow removal operation, larger in fact than the previous one undertaken in 2019. Crews are out now to spot locations that need further immediate snow plowing and clearing. We'll also be opening up 311 on Thursday for receipt of snow service requests, so that people can flag any areas that might have been missed. And doing it on Thursday simply allows us to complete the work that we're doing today and then start to receive those service requests on Thursday. TTC and city crews have also been working nonstop to free the more than 500 buses that were stranded by the storm. Early this morning, we were down to about 150 buses still stranded, while having 97% of the scheduled bus service being offered to TTC customers. At the last update, further on today, they were down to 80 buses, with the focus being to get all of the buses back to the garages, the TTC garages, today. We're doing everything we can to get this major cleanup done. And I want to thank people for their patience and for helping their neighbors, and that is something I would encourage them to continue to do, to look in on neighbors, help those who might need a bit of extra help dealing with this. There are some great stories about neighborly cooperation out there, which come as no surprise in this city. We see it any time we get into trouble, whether it's a pandemic or a snowstorm. I know some people are likely looking out at their own street or sidewalk, especially if it's been missed so far. I understand how you feel. I want you to know that we are working 24 hours a day to make sure that we get these things done, that we will on Thursday be receiving requests for service at 311, so that those things that might not yet have been brought to our attention will get into a process that will make sure they can get looked after and that we can get on top of these remaining spots. And finally, I just want to say thank you to all of those who've been involved, beyond thanking the people for their patience with us and for giving us intelligence that we need in order to do this job really well. I want to thank the people that are doing the work, that have been working all night and all day to make sure that we clear this up and that we then move on to remove as much of this snow as we can. I wanted to thank them for their dedication and thank the people for the patience that they've exhibited thus far. Today is also the day on which the Executive Committee agenda for next week's meeting was made public. I want to focus on two specific and very important reports coming to our first meeting of 2022. Over the past nearly 2 years, the term safe has been heavily attributed to COVID-19 and to the health pandemic. We've talked a lot about safety in the context of the pandemic. But work on community safety and well-being has been ongoing at the same time. An in-depth report was released today on SAFE-TO, Toronto's 10-year community safety and well-being plan, the long-term framework for which was approved by the City Council last July. The report released today lays out the real, tangible action we are going to take as a city to start the implementation of this plan. Simply put, having the entire community work together to prevent crime is, in the minds of those who wrote this report, and in my mind too, it's a lot better to prevent crime from happening than it is to reacting after that crime has already happened, and that lies at the root of this report. So year one of the implementation of this report will focus on building a strong foundation that includes priority actions. And the report outlines what residents will actually see across the City of Toronto this year, which includes, first, the introduction of an alternate method of crisis response that is community-led, client-centered, and focused on reducing harm. This approach will be introduced through 4 community pilots, and I'll have more to say about this in a moment. Second, the establishment of a Toronto office to prevent gun violence. We found that when you bring everybody to the table and everybody sits together, not just the police, but everybody sits together, that the results are much better. Third, better supports for victims and communities impacted by violence by enhancing the Community Crisis Response Program and the community partnerships that provide trauma-informed, culturally responsive supports. I have been to the scenes of criminal activity as mayor, and I can tell you that when the response teams are there on a timely basis, it can make a very positive difference in terms of helping those people in those neighborhoods get through these criminal activities. But they need to be there on a timely basis, and the enhancement of these programs is going to make a positive difference. And finally, the creation of a multi-sector data center for the purpose of informing real-time policy development and service planning. There are many examples out there of information that is collected by various parties that are very involved in our community, like the school board, for example, and historically it hasn't been the case that we have all shared that information with each other, which puts us in a better position to prevent crime and to keep people safe. The SafeTO advisory table will also help us to enhance already established partnerships with the other levels of government and within the community. The advisory will consist of people from city divisions and agencies, but will also include leaders working in many different sectors of the community, grassroots agencies, community leaders representing different kinds of core issues. This implementation plan was developed in cooperation and collaboration with Toronto Public Health, the Toronto Police Service, Toronto Community Housing, and partners in community and other institutions. And the communities across the city, people living in the neighborhoods that often are places where they experience criminal activity, told us that they needed to be involved in the prevention of crime, and involving them at the grassroots level is exactly what we're doing through this report. We know that we can't do this alone. Collaborative effort recognizes that safety doesn't just lie with the city, and it doesn't just lie with the police or with community groups on their own. It's something that we need to work on together. And some of our initiatives this summer proved that when people sat together, we could make a big difference in terms of community safety. So the matter that always arises, of course, and something that's very important, is what are you going to invest in order to help make this happen? I will tell you that a combined total of over $12 million in funding for the first year has been included in 3 new and enhanced budget requests that are part of the budget that was presented this week. We all want a safer Toronto, and this report makes it clear that this is a top priority and that we are prepared as a city to put the resources and the people behind it to make it happen. I wanted to discuss another report, and it's related to some extent, that is coming forward as part of the Executive Committee agenda next week, which is the Community Crisis Support Service, which will be ready to launch this year. This is a very significant initiative that's been discussed for a long time and was something that was a key part of the renewal and reform of response to calls from people in distress that we talked about a year or so ago. This initiative will be a key part of SafeTO, and it will test a new community-led response to mental health and distress calls to 911, including persons in crisis and wellness checks. Residents and community organizations have made it very clear to us that they want a non-police response available in appropriate situations to those people who find themselves in crisis. This is a significant new initiative which we committed to developing so that distress calls could far more frequently be answered by mental health professionals as opposed to by the police. Now we have the first stage of that program, a Toronto-made model that is community-led, centered on individual people, trauma-informed, and focused on harm reduction for calls involving Toronto residents in crisis. And there are tens of thousands of those calls that come to 911 every year. Last year, city staff initiated a competitive process to determine who the partners would be that would help us deliver this response, this crisis response, in 4 chosen areas of the city. Response to community feedback and input, to service delivery partners that we were looking for, including those who could help us with Indigenous-led, Black-led, LGBTQ2S-led organizations. These are the ones that we've chosen to help make sure that we can deliver culturally responsive response to people who are in crisis. And so today the report outlines the partners who have been chosen: the Taibu Community Health Center for the Northeast pilot in the northeast part of the city, the Gerstein Crisis Center for the Downtown East pilot, the Canadian Mental Health Association Toronto for the Northwest pilot, and the Two-Spirited People of the First Nations for the Downtown West pilot. The new service will launch in 2 phases, with the pilots in Northeast and Downtown East anticipated to be active in March of this year, 2022, and those in the Northwest and Downtown West by June of 2022. So we're moving ahead quickly with this, and again, the funds have been provided for as a significant new item in the 2022 proposed budget. These are tangible, solid steps forward on the commitment that we have made to develop and implement a response mechanism for people in distress, which has a focus on mental health professionals as opposed to a police-only response. These 4 areas chosen as part of the pilot are where apprehensions under the Mental Health Act and 911 calls for people in crisis are the highest. So it just makes sense we would pilot these new initiatives in those 4 areas. The pilots will feature mobile, multidisciplinary teams of trained support specialists like community health nurses, crisis counselors, harm reduction workers, and peer workers. They'll operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they'll provide end-to-end case management, including not just dealing with the crisis when it occurs, but follow-up support, health care, referrals, trauma counseling, housing support, and other support dedicated to these individuals who find themselves in distress. The pilots will allow the city to test and to evaluate and to revise this model before we implement it on a larger scale. But make no mistake, it is our intention to implement it on a larger scale and to have it citywide by 2025 at the latest. An integral component to the pilots is the partnership with 211. And this is an existing service that provides information and referrals for community and social services every day of every week, every hour of every day in the City of Toronto. The city has finalized a call triaging process, a prioritization service with the Toronto Police Services and with 211, where 211 will be responsible for triaging and dispatching calls to the mobile teams and connecting callers to the follow-up supports. As part of the increased funding I announced earlier of over $12 million, more than $8.5 million of this increase will go towards these community crisis support service pilots. And together with the base funding included in last year's budget, the pilots are fully funded in this year's proposed budget. We know this is something residents want. We know this is something that people in crisis need in the broadest sense, and we know there is a need to put sufficient resources behind it, and that's exactly what we've done. 2020 alone, Toronto Police Services attended 33,059 person in crisis calls, which was the highest volume of calls ever, an increase of 29.8% over the last 5 years. The time for a program like this is right now, and we're all working together to implement it in the right way. These are 2 very important reports coming to the Executive Committee next week. While we've been very focused, obviously, on a lot of day-to-day matters and on, of course, the pandemic, work has been underway to address other pressing issues that the city faces. These reports represent real, solid steps forward in identifying, designing, and implementing programs and approaches which place less of a burden on the police themselves and which use community and professional resources to prevent crime and to support those who are in distress. I want to thank our city staff for bringing forward these reports and for helping to make all of this a reality. And I look forward to their discussion and approval at the Executive Committee and then at City Council. And I want to thank everybody across our city government as well, including the Toronto Police Service. They have been an integral part of how we can make all of these programs work together as a collaborative effort in which the police and everybody else can work together to better serve the needs, especially of people who are in distress, but also to prevent crime and work with the community to do that in our neighborhoods. These will mark a real change for a lot of people in our city that would not be possible without the help of all the partners who are helping us with our one common shared goal, that of a safer city, and a city in which more effective and compassionate and appropriate sensitive treatment can be accorded to those who are in distress. I'm hopeful that my council colleagues will see value in these programs and move forward with them as quickly as we can. Are there any questions that you have today?
Thank you, Mayor Tory. We will now take questions from the media. Reminder, it's 1 question, 1 follow-up, and we will unmute you in turn. And as an FYI, we also have Denise, Executive Director of Development, Finance, and on the line. First up, we have Chris Glover from CBC. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi there, Mayor. Thank you for taking our questions. I just interviewed a woman in Scarborough today who says that her street has not been touched by a plow yet. And she says, looking around, she's seeing that wealthier neighborhoods are getting clear streets over poor neighborhoods like hers. And also, I just read in the city's release that calls of missed clearing won't be accepted by 311 until Thursday morning. So, what would you tell this woman and anyone in a similar position?
I would say that, you know, in any effort like this, which we're sparing no effort and no expense to get it done, there's going to be somebody who gets done earlier than somebody else. And I know that doesn't make her feel any better, but I can just assure her and people like her across the city, where we know there are some streets that haven't yet been done, that they're going to get done. That we wanted to be able to make that effort before we started taking the 311 service request calls, so that we could have as much done as possible by that time. To utterly reject any suggestion that there are certain neighborhoods that get priority over certain others. I can tell you that some of the observations and registrations of requests for help that I've received in my office have come from some of the more comfortable neighborhoods in the city, and those are just streets that happen to have been missed, and that can happen when you're dealing with thousands of kilometers of road. So we're going to keep at this. Our staff are doing a great job. They're working 24 hours a day. They have hundreds of people and trucks and all kinds of equipment out doing this. We're going to get this job done. And I can just tell the woman who's written from Scarborough or approached you and others that the job will get done. And it is getting done. And we're making very solid progress, given this is a storm that happened, about 48 hours ago. And we've been hard at it since, and will continue to be.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, just to clear something up, I noticed in the city's release that abandoned vehicles parked in designated snow routes will be tagged and towed starting today. But then just a touch further down in that release, I saw that friendly tows are going to be provided to make room for snow removal equipment. And in there, it includes on designated snow routes. So I'm just trying to figure out the difference between who would be tagged and towed starting today and who's just going to receive a friendly tow.
Well, the operational decision is made by operations people, not by politicians and not by the mayor. But they will look at these on a case-by-case basis. And the friendly tows are instances where, people have, for example, it's easier to tow a car that has been, deliberately parked and is not covered in snow from 2 days ago, but has just been put there this morning and is blocking the snow clearing or snow removal operations, to tow those cars as you would have in a no stopping zone during rush hour. And those are the kinds of instances in which I expect they will have a tow that is more consistent with what you'd normally experience when you're parked illegally, as distinct from instances that may arise where cars have been, in effect, blocked in for some lengthy period of time. But these are decisions made by the operational people, and I would suggest, if you want to try and get further, differentiation as between the different kinds of calls, that you would speak to the public servants involved.
Thank you, Chris. Next up, we have Mark McAllister from City News. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor. I just wanted to speak about another matter. I know that you had been involved in discussions with the province this morning as part of the housing summit. I'm just wondering what you may have got out of that. I know that the city itself has a number of initiatives to try and get more housing built in different ways. What more can you gain from what the province was doing this morning?
I think what was great about the Housing Summit, in which I was pleased to take part, was that it happened, and that you had there the municipalities across the province, plural, together with the Premier and the Minister, both of whom stayed for the entire meeting and listened to every word that was said. And if you looked at what the key theme was, it was that we have to work together to try and make more efficient the process of bringing on new supply. I will tell you that in the city of Toronto, I think, as you know, especially on the affordable housing front, we have produced record numbers of units compared to almost any time in our history going back decades. And that is because we've put up our own land. We found ways to speed up the process. We have attracted the support of the federal government in particular through their national housing strategy. And this has helped us to do very well at increasing the supply of affordable housing. But the main theme coming out of today's meeting was that the supply coming into the market of all kinds of housing, including in particular affordable housing, is still not what is needed to meet the population growth that's taking place in this region, especially in the city of Toronto. I'm very heartened by that population growth because it means this continues to be a place that is a magnet for people from around the world. So I think that the key part coming out of it is that there was not an environment of pointing fingers at one another, but rather an environment in which the Premier, the Minister, and the mayors agreed that we have to work together to eliminate obstacles, to stop duplication that we have, to shorten up time periods that may be longer than they need to be in order to be diligent in protection of the environment and things like that. And these things have to happen. We all believe strongly that there has to be protection of all kinds of different considerations, but that we can perhaps look at ways in which we can just make those processes more efficient without sacrificing in any way the quality of the decisions. So I thought it was a very productive meeting, and we'll see what comes out of it by way of specific changes that can be made by municipalities and by the province and by the federal government, because it was very much emphasized that the solution to the supply of affordable housing and all housing will involve all three governments.
I had no follow-up question from me. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have Momin Qureshi from 680. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my question, Mayor Tory. This is either for you, or I don't know if somebody from transportation can answer it as well. We're about to head into a deeper freeze. It's warming up a bit now, but then it's going to drop significantly by the afternoon to -20, and then even colder in the coming days. And I just wanted to know specifically for today and then in the coming days, if falling into that deeper freeze and the snowbanks becoming blocks of ice versus snow, what kind of challenge that will present for the clearing operation?
Well, the freezing and thawing will present a challenge, and just the quantity of snow is a challenge the likes of which we haven't seen for many years. The staff indicated this morning in what will be these daily discussions we're going to have about the progress we're making, that by, for example, on the streets themselves, putting some salt down, you can help to prevent some of that freezing on the streets themselves and on the sidewalks themselves. And they'll be going about doing some of that. But the key really will be just to move forward with these clearing and plowing, and then starting later today, the removal operation, so you can get this snow, off the streets into the storage facilities as soon as possible. Obviously, what the city has that average people don't have is very heavy equipment that can deal with the freezing situation that we may confront with these snowbanks. And so I'm sure that that's what they will deal with because they're accustomed to dealing with that. But it is something where Mother Nature isn't cooperating. Normally, the reason in Toronto we don't have snow removal very often as opposed to snow clearing and snow plowing, where we actually don't come and take the snow away in a truck, is because quite often Mother Nature, in even the month of January, we all know the expression a January thaw. This often happens, and it means that by the time you'd get around to snow removal, that the snow would be melted. But in this case, we've looked at the long-range weather, and it looks like over the next 10 days or so, there isn't going to be such a thaw. And so that's why we're moving ahead very smartly with snow removal to actually take the snow off the streets, starting in the priority order you would expect, so that it can be taken elsewhere and left in these storage facilities and get off the streets.
And my follow-up is, I know you addressed it a little bit earlier, but I had a couple of people reach out to me saying that there are some abandoned TTC buses that are still blocking the entrances to their condo buildings or certain parking lots. Do we have a timeline as to when the goal is to get all of those removed and out of the way?
The objective, as given to me by the TTC in the same updating meeting this morning, was to have it all done and all the buses returned to the garages by the end of day today. And I hope people understand that no operator, wanted to consciously or deliberately abandon their bus. This happened in the midst of an incredible storm that was dumping 5 centimeters of snow per hour. The buses are not necessarily the most easily managed vehicles during a storm like that. And then the task was very large, obviously, and they've got all hands on deck, including outside contractors and so on, to take what was hundreds of buses and to tow them or otherwise free them from the snow. So they've come down even in the last 12 hours from 150 to 80. And down below that, I think the number I had in my briefing was 62, and they hope to have it all done by the end of the day, because we know it's caused some dislocation for residents in different ways, and we want to get those buses into the garage and get them fixed up and back on the road.
Thank you, Momin. Next up, we have David Rauter from the Star. Go ahead.
Hi. First question for Mayor Tory, I think, is when you talk about sort of an office to tackle gun violence, I think most people, picture a bunch of people sitting around looking at charts or doing things that maybe wouldn't tangibly stop the kind of on the street actions that lead to these kinds of terrible tragedies and the deaths often of young people, often of racialized young people. I'm hoping you can just illuminate a little more how this is not going to be sort of a bureaucratic operation.
Historically, I think what we've done is to say, well, most of this rests with the police and that they're going to go out and deal with these kinds of criminal activities and these kinds of tragedies as they come up. There's been an effort, a considerable effort made by the city to invest in programs that I call programs for kids and families. But I think what we haven't done until just recently is to bring all the parties to the table. And without getting into an exhaustive list, it includes people all the way from the United Way to the school boards, to the police, to Toronto Community Housing, to many other agencies on the ground at the grassroots that help prevent crime and help deal with the after effects of crime. And I think that what we've, realize is there's a need for somebody not to sit and pore over papers, but rather to make sure that in every neighborhood locally, that those people are all being brought together around a table where we've proven to ourselves that you can actually reduce the level of crime and provide a degree of support to those who've experienced crime in different neighborhoods by doing that. And so it's going to be very much an activist office in that respect, as opposed to some kind of an office that pores over papers. And it's meant to bring all the partners together, including, but not as it has been often, limited to the police. It'll go way beyond that to get everybody involved in preventing crime and keeping the city safe.
Thank you. The follow-up is in the reports, there's lots of talk of asking the provincial and federal governments for money, as there are in many city reports and many ongoing requests for help on various things. I'm just wondering, given that the funding is only for 1 year, it's generous, but it there's nothing that says that it's going to continue that way. And we have seen some past strategies where maybe the money wasn't spent or the resources weren't always there. Number one is, what exactly do you need from the provincial and federal governments? And number two, how do you ensure that this 10-year strategy continues robustly and doesn't kind of die in the vine for lack of funding?
I don't think you've seen anything on which there was a more united council commitment to move forward than to develop, for example, a mental health professional response for people in crisis. And so to me, this year's funding, which is put in, because we only do budgets 1 year at a time, is something that is going to get that up and running. It's going to prove that it will be a success, because I'm sure it will be, in cooperation with the police and others. And I think that that in and of itself will both cause us to want to expand this citywide and increase the funding, not just maintain it, but also to prove to people that this is the right way to go. We need the help of the other governments. I mean, they have, for example, the federal government announced quite a lot of money, which hasn't yet been distributed to municipalities like Toronto for crime prevention. I would think this could be an entirely appropriate place for that kind of funding to come on the SAFE-TO aspect of this report, where we're engaged in different activities that have their focus on crime prevention as opposed to reacting to crime, by having those kinds of resources. So we've been patiently pursuing that, minister after minister, election after election, and it's time, I think, for that money to come forward. It has been committed to by the government. It's been committed to, I think, in their budget, the last one before this most recent federal election, and we need that help now in order to help fund these programs. But we're stepping forward and doing whatever we can as a city government, because we know that community safety is something that is prized by people, at the very top of their list.
Thank you. And our last question is Doug Gamey from
Today, the City of Barrie is implementing a new program that allows residents to have parking tickets canceled with proof of purchase from a Barrie restaurant. Is this something that you might consider in Toronto?
I would look at any idea that would help to encourage people to patronize our restaurants with, I guess at the moment, it's takeout in the main. What I'm very hopeful is that, before you could even get the administration of such an idea put together, that these restrictions are going to be lifted so that we can return to indoor dining. Now, it may be the case that you could argue that that kind of incentive could work after the restrictions are lifted, including indoor dining. In our case, as you know, we've chosen to pursue things like the Winterlicious program, which will come along when indoor dining is allowed again. We have pursued the Cafe TO program, which will come in the spring. And these are all things to which we're committing millions of dollars, quite literally, to encourage people to patronize restaurants now and going forward. And so any of these ideas we're quite happy to look at. But I think we have a series of ideas now that I think are going to be very effective both during the winter months. And I think the most powerful thing we can do is just to ask people to focus on local when it comes to eating and when it comes to other kinds of shopping as well. These smaller businesses have suffered a lot because of these lockdowns and capacity restrictions. And I hope people will, on their own, decide that when they're going to, have something to eat or when they're going to buy something that they think local. And we will continue with the initiatives that we've had, but we're always willing to look at others.
Thank you. That is all the questions for today. Have a great day.